People always assume the moment you leave a toxic family, it's dramatic. Screaming, doors slamming, threats flying like glass. But mine wasn't like that. I just left. Quietly. Without warning. Without a speech. I packed 2 bags, left my keys on the table, and walked out while they were asleep. There wasn't anything left to say. My name's Evan. I'm 24 now, but back then, I was 21, old enough to legally be on my own, but young enough that people still called me kid when they wanted me to feel small. Growing up in that house, everything was either my fault or my responsibility. My parents, Ron and Diane, had this habit of twisting anything that didn't fit their version of events into some failure of mine. Bad mood? It must have been something I said. Bills piling up? Probably because I didn't pick up enough shifts. Family argument? I was being too sensitive, again. And my brother Noah? He never got that treatment. If he skipped class, it was because the teachers were boring. If he got caught lying, well, boys will be boys. But when I stayed in my room to avoid the tension, they called it antisocial behavior. I didn't even notice how much weight I was carrying until I left. Because when you grow up in it, chaos feels normal. Guilt feels like air. The last straw wasn't something big. It never is. It was a Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from a double shift at the warehouse. My feet hurt, my back ached, and I was hoping for a hot shower and some silence. Instead, I walked into a living room full of shouting. Noah had crashed my dad's car the night before, again. Except this time, the damage wasn't minor. The front bumper was a mess, and my dad's insurance was threatening to drop him. But instead of being mad at Noah, they were angry with me. Why? Because I hadn't kept an eye on him. Because I should have talked some sense into him. Because I always acted like I was better than everyone. Ron's voice was loud enough to shake the walls. Diane stood behind him, arms crossed like punctuation to every accusation. Noah didn't say a word. He never had to. You think working a few shifts makes you the man of the house? Ron snapped. You've never sacrificed anything for this family. Not really. You only care about yourself. That hit harder than I expected. Because for years I'd skipped outings. Turned down better jobs so I could help pay bills at home. I'd stayed back when I got accepted into a college out of state, because they said they couldn't manage without me. And now? Now, I was being told I was selfish. That night I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just went to my room, closed the door, and realized something that changed everything. They weren't going to see me differently. No matter what I did, no matter how much I gave, they'd always rewrite the story to make me the villain. So I waited. Until everyone went to bed. Then I packed 2 duffel bags. Essentials only. Left the rest behind. I had about $2,000 in savings, not enough to get far, but enough to get out. I left my house keys on the kitchen counter. No note. No goodbye. Did they want me to be the selfish one? Fine. I'd show them what that really looked like. When I left, I didn't expect a rescue party. But I did think someone would notice. Maybe a text. A voicemail. A question, even if it was laced with guilt. But the next day came and went, and my phone stayed silent. No missed calls. No worried messages. Just a sudden stillness where my family had always been, loud, chaotic, and suffocating. It hit me harder than I thought it would. I'd spent years in that house, walking on eggshells, carrying burdens that weren't mine. I didn't leave because I wanted revenge. I left because I was exhausted. Because I finally realized no one was coming to fix it. But part of me still thought they'd care. They didn't. I got a cheap motel room for a couple of nights and spent the first 48 hours sleeping. The kind of sleep that doesn't come easy when you've lived in tension. No banging doors. No arguing in the hallway. Just the hum of the AC and a TV that barely worked. After that, I found a room for rent posted on the corner of a grocery store's bulletin board. It was a basement unit in a rundown house owned by an older guy named Keith. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a key and said, "Don't break the washing machine. It's older than you." It was dark, cold, smelled faintly of dust, but it was quiet. And for once, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like relief. I got a job bussing tables at a local diner. Didn't pay much, but it gave me a routine. I started waking up early. Took long walks just to think. Spent hours in the library, reading everything I could, books on budgeting, psychology, coding, even real estate. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving someone else's version of me. I was figuring out who I was without the noise. 3 weeks went by. Still, nothing from my parents. Noah hadn't texted. Diane hadn't posted anything about me. Ron hadn't reached out. I even checked their social media, just to be sure. Lena's birthday photos were up, balloons, cake, smiling family. I wasn't in a single frame. It was like I had never existed. There was a sting in that. But also clarity. They hadn't forgotten me by accident. They just didn't want to deal with what it meant that I was gone. To them, I wasn't a son who walked out. I was a burden that finally removed itself from the equation. And that told me everything I needed to know. I could have reached out. I could have explained myself. Maybe tried to defend my choice. But the longer I stayed away, the easier it became to accept that I didn't owe them a reason. I'd always felt like a guest in their house. Like I had to earn my place every single day. But here, in this half-finished basement with chipped paint and mismatched curtains, I had more peace than I ever did in my childhood bedroom. And peace, I was learning, doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be yours. The thing about building a life from scratch is, no one claps for you. No applause, no cheering crowd. Just early mornings, long nights, and quiet victories that nobody sees but you. That was my life now. I woke up before sunrise to work a double shift, came home with tired feet and calloused hands, and then studied for online certifications I couldn't afford but took anyway. I was grinding, not for recognition, but for distance. I didn't want to get away from my family. I wanted to get so far they couldn't reach me, even if they tried. Meanwhile, their silence continued. Until it didn't. About 4 months after I left, I got a message from Lena. We hadn't spoken since I was 17. She was the oldest, the one who moved out early and barely looked back. When she did visit, it was always brief. Hugs at the door. Fake smiles. And then she was gone again, like a ghost who didn't want to haunt the place too long. Hey. I don't know what happened, but Dad's not doing great. Things are kind of a mess. You might want to call Mom. No greeting. No. How are you? No mention of my absence. Just a quiet suggestion that the house, the one I was supposedly selfish for leaving, was starting to collapse. I didn't respond. I didn't delete the message either. I just let it sit there, like a letter I never planned to mail. A week later, a second message came. Noah's back at home. Dropped out. Moms are overwhelmed. It's bad, Evan. That one made me pause. Because for all the things Noah had done, the lies, the fights, the nights he played victim while I got blamed, I never thought he'd lose control entirely. But here it was. The golden boy back under their roof, with no degree and no direction. And I wasn't there to clean it up. That's when it clicked. I was never the problem. I was the glue. I was the one who worked extra hours to cover gaps in the bills. The one who talked Noah down when he wanted to quit school the first time. The one who took the blame just to keep the peace. And when I left, the structure held for a while, out of habit maybe. But now the cracks were showing. Loudly. Their lives weren't falling apart because I left. They were falling apart because I was the only one holding them together in the first place. I didn't celebrate that. I wasn't gloating. But it did something inside me, a quiet shift. For once, I saw my absence as power. I wasn't just forgotten. I was finally free of their dependence. And they were learning how much of their stability came from someone they never bothered to thank. I still didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I needed them to feel the full weight of what it meant to lose me. For the first time, they couldn't blame me. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about letting them fall. 3 months after Lena's last message, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was my mom. Hi, Evan. It's your mother. We haven't heard from you. I know you're probably still upset, but your father's not well. We'd like to talk. Just talk. Her voice sounded tired. Not desperate, just heavy. like she wasn't used to asking for anything without strings attached. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I just didn't know what I could say that hadn't already been said through silence. They had made it clear, for years, that my feelings were optional. My absence wasn't sudden. It was just the first time I stopped asking permission to be seen. Still, I started to think. Not about going back. But about the version of myself they thought they remembered, the one who stayed quiet, carried the weight, absorbed the blame. That version was gone. And maybe it was time they realized that. I waited another week before I sent a reply. Just one line. If you want to talk, you're going to have to answer some things first. No emojis. No soft opening. Just clarity. My phone rang the next day. I picked up. There was a pause before she spoke. Evan. I didn't know if you'd answer. I didn't say anything. I know you think we didn't care. I stopped her right there. It's not what I think. It's what I lived. Silence again. We were under pressure, she said. Your father's job was always unstable, and no one needed. So did I. Those 3 words hung in the air like smoke. You always seemed fine, she said. I almost laughed. Fine? I was 17 and working part-time to help with groceries. Skipping meals so they could afford Noah's textbooks. I held back tears in the middle of dinner because the moment I spoke up I was starting drama. I wasn't fine. I was functional. There's a difference. You never asked how I was doing, I said. You never once asked why I kept leaving the house so early, or why I stopped talking at the table. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. That, more than anything, made me stop talking, too. Then came her question. So what do we do now? I had an answer ready. I'd been sitting with it for months. You let me be. That's what you do. I wasn't looking for an apology. What I needed was space. What I needed was for them to stop rewriting the past just because the present made them uncomfortable. We ended the call on neutral terms. No raised voices. No tears. Just the unspoken understanding that something had shifted, and it wasn't going back to the way it was. After that, I didn't block their numbers. But I didn't go home either. A few weeks after that call, I got a message from my mom. You're welcome to come home for dinner sometime. No pressure. Just, if you want. I read it twice. It was short. Measured. Like someone trying not to scare off a stray dog. Not cruel. Not demanding. But it still landed wrong. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully said out loud, even to myself. I wasn't waiting to be invited back. I wasn't looking for permission to return to a place that treated my presence like a favor. I didn't want a seat at the table out of guilt or nostalgia. I didn't need it anymore. That invitation didn't feel like healing. It felt like convenience. Maybe they missed the idea of me. Maybe they missed the version who filled gaps, played mediator, and cleaned up the mess without complaint. Maybe they missed having someone who kept the family running smoothly while the rest of them spun out. But they didn't know me now. I wasn't the same. And that version of me, the one they remembered, wasn't coming to dinner. Still, I didn't ghost them. I kept the line open. I answered if they called, but I didn't share much. Conversations were shallow. No talk about the past. No emotional check-ins. It was all surface level. How's work? Staying busy? Maybe stop by sometime? It felt polite. That was all. And polite isn't the same as repaired. Meanwhile, I was building something real. I'd moved into a better place, no more basement apartment. I had a solid job doing back-end systems support, and I'd even started helping small businesses build out their online operations. Word of mouth brought in steady clients. A few local startups kept me on retainer. I was saving, planning, living, and doing it without them. One night, I came across an old family photo while digging through some storage. We were standing in front of the house, probably around the holidays. Everyone was smiling. I was, too, but I remember that moment. I'd just finished a shift at the store, still wearing my uniform under the jacket. Nobody had said thank you. I looked at my face in the picture, tired, quiet, fading into the edges, and I barely recognized that version of me. That kid wanted so badly to belong. To be appreciated. To matter. I wish I could talk to him now. I'd tell him he doesn't have to keep proving himself to people who refuse to see his worth. He can leave. And he'll be okay. That photo went into a drawer. Not as a symbol of pain, but as proof of how far I'd come. A few days later, my mom texted again. Still hoping you'll stop by. Your dad would really like that. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't angry, just tired of the performance. I had nothing to prove and nothing to apologize for. And I knew that going back wouldn't feel like returning home. It would feel like visiting someone else's story. And I'd already started writing my own. I didn't realize how much weight I'd been carrying until it was gone. Not all at once. There wasn't a single moment where everything just stopped hurting. But slowly, I began to notice things were different. I could sleep without clenching my jaw. I could sit in silence, and not feel the need to fill it with explanations or excuses. I no longer replayed old arguments in my head, thinking of what I should have said. I was just living. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door or wait for permission to enter. It just settles in the quiet corners of your life until one day, you realize you're not waiting anymore, not for validation, not for closure, not for someone else to finally admit you were right. You're just breathing easier. I still get messages from my mom now and then. Sometimes a link to a news article. Sometimes a holiday greeting. Sometimes there is nothing at all for weeks, followed by a sudden thinking of you. They never asked me to come back outright, but the undertone was always there. A soft suggestion that the door was open. That I could re-enter the orbit if I wanted to. But the thing is, I wasn't lost. I hadn't run away or vanished into some dark hole. I'd simply stepped out of a story where I was always cast as the villain. And the farther I walked, the more I understood that it wasn't my job to fix the narrative. They were welcome to tell themselves whatever they needed to sleep at night. I was telling the truth, and living in it. Work kept me busy. I took on more freelance contracts. I saved up for a better car. I reconnected with people I'd lost touch with, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. I even started mentoring someone at my company, someone who reminded me of who I used to be. Quiet. Overlooked. Trying too hard to matter to the wrong people. Helping him help me. It reminded me that I had more to offer than just endurance. I didn't need to be useful to be valued. One weekend, I went hiking alone. Just a day trip, no dramatic revelations. But standing at the edge of that trail, breathing in the open air, I thought about the version of me who once sat at that old kitchen table, holding back tears while everyone argued over who was to blame for things that were never my fault. He was gone now. Not erased, just grown. Transformed by distance, shaped by choice. Not angry. Not resentful. Just done with trying to belong in places where silence was expected and self-worth was treated like arrogance. I didn't need to slam the door behind me. I just needed to keep walking. Now and then, someone asks if I have ever made peace with my family. It's a hard question to answer. Not because I'm conflicted, but because people expect a dramatic reunion. They think peace means sitting across a table, forgiving everything, and pretending none of it left a mark. But peace didn't come from a conversation. It came from walking away. I didn't slam the door to make a point. I didn't craft some dramatic exit speech so they'd feel sorry. I just stopped showing up in a place where I was constantly expected to prove I deserved to be there. And they called me selfish for that. As if wanting to breathe was a betrayal. As if choosing to live on my terms meant I'd turn my back on family. But the truth is, I wasn't rejecting them. I was choosing myself, for the first time in my life. And when I did, everything changed. I didn't just leave that house. I left behind the version of me who swallowed every insult, who played peacemaker while being blamed for the war. I left behind the fear that I was only worth what I could contribute. I left the guilt that came with saying no. Now I live in a small apartment filled with things I picked out because I liked them. No one else's taste. No one else's approval. Just mine. I work for a company that respects my time. I've saved enough for emergencies, something I never thought I'd have. I cook real meals now, not just instant noodles. I laugh more. I sleep deeper. This morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the city wake up. For a second, I thought about my old life. That kitchen. Those arguments. The way they'd look at me like I was broken, like I was always one mistake away from being blamed again. And I realized I haven't thought about them in weeks. Not because I've erased them, but because they no longer define anything about me. I still get the occasional message from my mom. Still polite. Still distant. She asked recently if I was coming home for the holidays. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was angry. Just because I had plans. Plans with people who check in regularly. Who see me without needing a backstory. Who never made me earn the right to be loved. I'm not angry anymore. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just done. There's a quiet power in building a life without the people who once told you you'd never survive without them. And the best part? I didn't have to prove anything. They still don't understand what they lost. But I finally understand what I found. Me. And that's more than enough.